Howdy, my name is Nonat, and wow, Paizo released so much information about Secrets of Magic. This is going to be a long video, y'all, so apologies if I speak fast and go through it fast. Also, apologies, there's not going to be a whole lot of graphics popping up on screen through this video. They mostly gave us stuff through word of mouth, not a whole lot of images. I'll put up whatever images I do think are important, but other than that, it's going to be mostly me talking. So feel free to put me on in the background and leave this video playing so I get that sweet, sweet watch time. I have my whole list here. I'm just going to go from top to bottom. I've organized it as best I can. Apologies if I repeat anything. There is a lot here. So first off, there's going to be a ton of magical flavor in this book. Shocking. Flavor in a Pathfinder book, I know. But we are getting so much more information on magic as a subject in the Pathfinder world. We're going to get a specific piece of writing from each tradition of magic, from specific NPCs. An example they gave is that there's going to be an entire list of, I think, diary entries from a primal witch talking to her granddaughter or something like that. So it's going to be basically just pieces of writing for each tradition. And I think that's really cool. It's going to add some flavor to each tradition, what the casters seem to go through, and how their tradition links to their personal life. We're also getting an entire section on each individual school of magic, though I could have heard them wrong. It sounded like they said that these are written from the point of view of Mauricial, like the rogue iconic Mauricial, which would be weird, but then again, rogues are jack of all trades and super knowledgeable, so maybe it makes sense. But this is just going to be diving into detail with each school, including some really abstract stuff like colors, animals, and other themes associated with each school of magic. Conjuration, transmutation, evocation. I'm guessing like evocation is going to be like red and dragons and anger emotion. I don't know. It's just going to be a lot of cool flavor diving into each school as a concept. But enough flavor, let's dive into what you're really here for. We got so much information about the Magis. It is insane. They talked about how it was sort of in a confused state in the playtest. It was simultaneously limited, but also not strong enough to compensate for that limitation, and they have amended all of that. The Magis has gotten a total rework, and I think people are going to be very happy with what they hear. First off, the biggest change is that Spell Strike is no longer a 3-action activity. No longer is it 3 actions to store a spell and strike with the spell. Now it is only 2 actions. 1 action to store, 1 action to strike, which I believe have to happen at the same time, but it has a recharge feature now. You can spend 1 action to recharge your Spell Strike feature, so it still takes 3 actions to do it. But Paizo has had some fun with this new feature, and depending on your subclass, you'll be getting a different focus spell, which is a 1-action focus spell that allows you to simultaneously make an attack and recharge your spell strike. So effectively now, for 3 actions, if you have a focus point, you can spell strike and make another attack to recharge your spell strike, or recharge your spell strike first and then use it. It's a lot more flexible, or if you don't feel like recharging it, you can just spell strike and then function as a normal martial class. There's a lot more options for the Magis, and you're no longer stuck to, I spell strike, my turn is done. They've given us some examples, very, very vague examples of these focus spells. It seems like the focus spell is intrinsically tied to your subclass, obviously, and each subclass is tied to a specific type of weapon. Like there is a staff subclass whose focus spell allows you to attack 2 targets at once and recharge your spell strike, which is really cool. Some of them allow you to move around and recharge your spell strike, and others may make your attacks more accurate when you recharge your spell strike. So really, really cool stuff going on here. There is a brand new class feature being added to all Magises. Magis, I don't know. I'm just going to keep saying Magis because I always have. So many people felt that Bespell Weapon, the feat, was an integral part of the Magus' playstyle that it is now a base class feature known as Arcane Cascade. This is a stance that the Magus can get into that functions, I'm assuming, exactly like Bespell Weapon, where every time you cast a spell, you gain bonus damage on your next attack roll. I am so glad this is a class feature. It just screams Magus, and I am all about it. With that being said, they have limited the Magis in other ways. They couldn't just give them all of this and expect it to remain balanced. The Magis functions much more like the Eldritch Archer now. You can no longer put just any spell into your weapon. You can no longer attack someone with a sleep sword or a charm sword or something like that. By default, the Magis can only attack with spells that require an attack roll. Think Acid Arrow or... Am I dumb? Have I not played in that long? What spells require attack rolls? Acid Arrow heightened to 4th level. But you get what I'm saying. Along with that change, though, they have made the Magis similar to Eldritch Archer in the best possible way. You no longer need to make a second attack roll with Spell Strike. If you are spell striking with Acid Arrow and you hit with your sword, you also hit with Acid Arrow. And if you crit with your sword, you also crit with Acid Arrow. Fantastic, so happy to see that. And they aren't removing the ability to attack with a sleep sword or a status attack. There are now Magis feats that allow you to expand into those other types of spells that are not attack focused. I think that is the best possible solution for this, as it wasn't always what everyone wanted to do. Some people really wanted to be that evocation damaging Magis by default, so making that possible in the base class and allowing that sort of more niche type of status Magis to be a feat, I think is perfect. Good job, Paizo. All that being said, this may make some people upset. They did not give the Magis any more spell slots. It still only has 4 spell slots per day. That being said, it's still a monster with cantrips, and there are now going to be more feat options and class features that will specialize your Magis into specific types of spells. And those features will get you extra daily spell slots specifically of that type of magic. I don't know exactly what this is. They didn't give any specific details, but I'm guessing it's going to be like similar to a wizard school where you'll pick evocation and you can prepare 1 extra evocation spell at both of your spell levels per day. I think that'd be great. If that's like a 6th or 8th level feat, I think that'd be perfect. Get that nice little extra artillery in there, especially if it's competing with some other powerhouse feats. That'd be really, really solid. We also got to hear about all 5 different Magis subclasses, and they're so cool! I forgot to write down what they're called. I think they're called hybrid studies. I didn't write it down. That is entirely from my headspace, so apologies if that's wrong. But like I said, they're each based around the type of weapon you want to use, and each of them gives you a different starting focus spell, again, similar to a wizard school. We don't know what these focus spells are exactly, but we do know that each of them will be 1 action and recharge your spell strike along with an additional feature. The only example we got for certain was that the Twisting Tree study, which is the staff-focused Magis, gets a single action focus spell that allows them to make a melee attack against 2 adjacent targets and recharge their striking spell, which is really, really cool. Striking spell, spell strike, whatever. That's amazing. That's incredible action economy. That means for 3 actions, you can spell strike, attack 2 people, and recharge your spell strike. Granted, there's going to be multiple attack penalties up the wazoo, but it's still great. The other 4 hybrid studies are pretty much the ones that were in the playtest, though they have been renamed. Inexorable Iron is for 2-handed weapon Magises. Laughing Shadow is for the light weapon freehand Magis. The Sparkling Targe is for sword and shield Magises, and the Starlit Span is for archery and ranged Magises. The last bit of info we got about the Magis is that the multi-class archetype of Magis does grant Spell Strike as a 4th level feat. The dedication will just be granting cantrips like most spellcasting archetypes, but at 4th level, you can take the Spell Striker feat and you can use it once per minute. You do not have the option to recharge it like a Magis, but you can use it once per minute, so effectively this lets you use Spell Strike once per combat, which means your melee fighter can finally deal that insane magical critical hit in melee, not just from a range with Eldritch Archer. GMs, be ready for the 5th level Master Proficiency fighter getting a critical hit produce flame with their Great Axe. It's gonna hurt. If that's a striking weapon, how much damage is that? 4d12 plus 6d4 plus double strength, which is probably 4 at that point. So that's 72 plus 8. Yeah, it's a maximum of 80 damage at level 5. That's pretty good. Now, the Summoner got way less news released than the Magis. The Magis was definitely the main focus here because it went through a lot of changes. Summoner did not get many changes. Most of what they said is sort of a reiteration of what was in the playtest. They have a lot of hit points. They get 10 hit points per level. They have their tandem actions to work together. And like they updated in the playtest errata, Act Together can now be used to cast spells. Regardless of what those single actions are used for, the Act Together action grants you and your Eidolon a single action, and that can be one action as part of a 2 or 3 action activity, which is nice and no longer that limiting. So you can act together, your Eidolon can move, and you can begin casting Produce Flame, and then use your second action on that turn to finish casting Produce Flame. Also, manifesting is slightly faster and a bit more useful in the middle of combat. It still takes 3 actions to manifest your Eidolon, but when you do so, they do get to take a single action themselves. So it's 3 actions, summon your Eidolon, which is still restricted to any adjacent square. You can't summon it in the distance, but you summon it up, and if you're next to an enemy, you can attack them, which is way more viable for those ambushes where if you didn't already have your Eidolon out, your summoner was pretty useless. Looking at you, Hector. Other than that, there's been a bunch of quality of life updates, which they haven't leaked any. They said it wouldn't be interesting enough to talk about, but there were no huge changes to the playtest summoner. They did announce some new Eidolons, however. I'm just going to list all of them here. For Divine Eidolons, there is Angel and now Demon Eidolons, which is really cool. For Primal, we have the Beast, of course, as well as the Fae Eidolon. You can now have like a Fairy or Sprite Eidolon, which I think is super cool. Occult has the Devotion Phantom like it had before. It also has the Anger Phantom, which is much more offensive of focus. They said this is like the Barbarian of Eidolons. And they also got the Psychopomp Eidolon, which specifically deals positive and negative damage, which is a really nice option to have. And for Arcane, there's of course Dragon, and there is also Construct Eidolons have been confirmed. Super excited. Construct Eidolons are apparently really good at replacing features and evolving more than other Eidolons, so excited to see that. I also forgot that Primal also has the Plant Eidolon, just massive masses of plants that move with you. They're apparently focused on having reach and rooting enemies in place. Sounds awesome. Also, same as the Magis, the Summoner will have feat options to get additional specific spell slots, but they will still be restricted to their 4 spells per day at the base class. Alright, that's the 2 classes out of the way. Now let's talk Magic, and let's talk about all the stuff they're releasing. Holy cow. There is an entire section of this book known as the Book of Unlimited Magic, which gives new things for all classes. There are new concepts. They've focused on this book in creating brand new concepts rather than expanding existing features. Whether this is a positive or negative thing, we will have to see. This is the kind of thing that can lead to what some people consider system bloat, which is just more new systems and features throughout and new expansions on existing systems. But I think I like what they've done here. We'll have to see it in full release, though. The big thing they announced is that class archetypes are now a thing in Pathfinder 2e. There were rules for this in the core rulebook, but they were not added until almost 2 years into the game's life cycle. For those of you who aren't aware, class archetypes work exactly like an archetype, except they have prerequisites that say they can only be taken by certain classes. These don't just give you new abilities like an archetype, but they alter base class features. So if you are a ranger and take a ranger class archetype, it might take your hunt prey or hunter's edge and completely remove it or change how it works. A really important thing about these class archetypes is that they take up your second level feat. Regardless of the class you are playing, if you take a class archetype, you don't get a second level feat. Your second level feat is the dedication of that class archetype. But don't worry, you do get the benefits right at first level. So if you take a class archetype at level 1, you get the benefits of the dedication right away, but you don't get a second level feat. The first class archetype they leaked to us is the Flexible Spellcaster. And I gotta admit, I'm not a fan. Any prepared spellcaster, that is the witch, wizard, cleric, or druid, can take this class archetype. And it makes you prepare a smaller number of spell slots, but you can cast any spell you know freely. This is kind of, you know, in The Incredibles when Syndrome says, "Once everyone's super, no one will be." That's kind of how I feel about this. What's the difference between a sorcerer and a flexible wizard except the bloodline and the school? You know, their feat selection is already so similar. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. What's the point of having a sorcerer if you can already be a flexible wizard? Like, I get it. I guess if you want to be a flavorful wizard, you specifically want to have learned your magic and cast it like a sorcerer. Now there's a rules as written way to do it. But also I feel like this is way too powerful. And it'll depend on how limited their spell slots are. But imagine a sorcerer who can cast any arcane spell at will. If you have a spell book, you can cast way more spells than a sorcerer. A flexible wizard, unless they're limited to like 2 slots of each level, is just going to be better than a sorcerer, and I have some issues with that. And especially Cleric and Druid. Cleric and Druid are just better than sorcerers now, because they already have every spell. Clerics and Druids don't need to learn spells like a wizard. Clerics and Druids start the game knowing every common, primal, or divine spell in the entire game. I'm sorry for hitting my mic. That means if they're a flexible spellcaster, they can cast any spell in the game. At will. They don't have to learn it. They don't need to go through a side quest to get these spells. They can just cast them. If you're a divine sorcerer, you get like 3 first-level sorcerer spells. If you're a flexible cleric, you get all of them. I don't like it. The class archetypes will come back up, but now we need to talk about the 12 new magic systems. Oh my god, this is a lot. This is a lot. And it was really cool when I was hearing it in the presentation, but looking at my notes, this is a lot. I think it's important to note, these are all optional. Some are optional, some are not. A lot of them are up to the GM's discretion, but a lot of these are class archetypes. A lot of class archetypes are spellcaster focused, at least in this book, and relating them to different magical systems. Here is an example. Cathartic Magic. This is a new type of magic that is tied to a specific emotion of your character, whether it's anger, whether it's fear, whether it's pride. And this is a class archetype that gives you a new ability. When you tap into that emotion, you gain extra power on your spells. If you tap into your inner fear, you can harness it to enhance your magic. This is actually a parallel to the Barbarian's Rage mechanic, except for spellcasters. So think of this as a spellcaster's rage. You are heightening your emotion to gain extra power. And of course, when it ends, similar to the exhaustion or fatigue of a barbarian, you suffer mechanical drawbacks of that emotional overload as it just takes its toll on you. So, again, not super crazy, but it is going to expand the system wider, not taller, if that makes sense. The second magical system is elementalism. This is also a class archetype that gives you options that let you thrive in environments and evoke elemental powers, I believe, based on that environment. What they did say is that when you pick elementalism, it's not like the elemental sorcerer bloodline. When you pick elementalism, you are trained with all of the elements, and you can use each of them better or worse depending on the environment around you. If you're in the plane of fire, your fire elemental magic will be stronger. They've confirmed that monks and druids are getting elementalist archetypes. I don't know about other classes, probably wizard, I would assume, and probably sorcerer. And the big one is that druids are getting 4 new orders. Orders of fire, water, earth, and air. This is going to bump the total number of druid orders up to 8, which is insane. I don't know if they're all going to function similar or if they're all going to be totally unique, but that's really cool. I like more subclasses, give me that. I'm curious about the monk elementalist. I think that's going to be really, really neat. Yeah, that's elementalism. Not to be confused with geomancy, which they absolutely ripped off Final Fantasy, and I am okay with it. This is a class archetype that allows you to use geomancy, a special form of magic that changes depending on the terrain you're standing in. If you cast a geomancy spell, it will have a different effect if you cast it underground or in the ocean. It completely changes the effects of the spells, and I love this. I really, really like this. I don't know if it needed to be its own type of magic, or if you could have just released a few spells like with that tag. I think that would have worked just as well, but maybe they just didn't want everyone to have access to them. I don't know. It's a cool idea. might be overcomplicated. We'll have to see how it's implemented. Next up is leylines. This is more of a GM tool they mentioned. Leylines are focused on new rituals and really world building as a whole. It gives players the ability to perform rituals to find leylines, and when they know they're near a leyline, they can perform a skill action to gain a benefit depending on the leyline. These sound like they're going to be mostly meta magic-like effects. Effectively, this can make them spend an action to use their Arcana skill to draw the power from the leyline, and then it gives them reach spell for the rest of the turn. That kind of thing. It's a cool concept. I like it. If the leyline can cover an entire campaign setting, I think that'd be really cool. If the leylines can only cover very specific areas, that might get a little more complicated. Then another optional GM tool is Pervasive Magic. This is basically a slight change to the campaign setting. Pervasive Magic just means that magic is incredibly common, and everything from the simplest peasant to the simplest wolf in the forest has some semblance of magic. Commoners can cast Magic Missile and Mage Hand, and wolves can possibly, teleport or ignite their fangs in fire kind of deal. This is just a campaign setting option. I love this just as a cool option to have in the book. Even the terrain itself can be magical. Magically swift regrowing plants, or maybe just permanently cursed barren forests. Really cool stuff to play with there. Shadow Magic is adding the Shadow Caster archetype. This is just a spellcaster parallel to the Shadow Dancer archetype, grants its own unique spells that are focus spells and shadow-oriented, as well as giving you a Shadow Reservoir feat, which, similar to what I said about the Magis and Summoner, this can give you extra spell slots to cast shadow spells specifically. They're also adding rules for shadow companions, like a shadow hound animal companion, or even a shadow familiar. These pigeons gotta leave my finches alone, alright? Now the big one everyone was talking about, I'm still super into. Thessalonian Rune Magic, which if you're not aware, is runes that you slap on your skin like a henna tattoo, or a permanent tattoo, or I don't know, I've never used Thessalonian Rune Magic. But effectively, it apparently divides magic into 7 runes based on the 7 deadly sins, sloth, lust, gluttony. They're also adding the Rune Lord class archetype specifically for wizards. So it sounds like wizards are getting like 3 or 4 class archetypes, which is nuts. There'll be new rune-related options, and the Rune Lord wizard will get a unique focus spell depending on which sin they go with. Gluttony has its own focus spell, Wrath has a focus spell, etc. As much as I'm so here for the Thessalonian Rune Magic idea, I'm worried this is really a lot for wizards, especially with this giving them 7 more subclass options. If you consider the schools and the runes, that's what, 14, 15 different subclasses to pick from for wizard? I know they're not all full subclasses, but they still all give a different spell. I'm sure they all give a different minor bonus, like the schools give a spell slot. I'm sure the runes will give you something specific. That is a lot. Next up, True Names, another GM tool. It's True Names. If you've ever heard of them in mythology, it's exactly how they work here. There are spells that let you learn the true names of your foes and use it against them. There's going to be new true name focused spells. Not focus spells, but true name spells that are focused on true names. Terminology. Yeah, it's not something that players will usually have access to, and all of the true name stuff is going to have the rare tag, so it's up to the GM to use it and give access to it. Next up is definitely not wild magic. I'm sorry, Paizo, I love you. I'm talking about Wellspring Magic. This is something that any spontaneous caster can get, and prepared casters cannot. So basically, it's what you'd expect. There is a deep and powerful wellspring of magic within you that whenever you cast a spell, has a chance to go haywire and cause a random effect. They gave 2 examples here, the first being Verdant Clutch, which is plants and vines grow all within 20 feet of you, immobilizing all creatures with a reflex save, and then there is Strike Up the Band, which gives you your own theme music that changes depending on your actions. This gives you bonuses to charisma skills like intimidation or diplomacy, but it gives you -2 to deception because the music lets them know you're being deceitful. The Wellspring can apparently also be used to restore spell slots, sort of the inverse of the flexible caster I talked about earlier. This means that spontaneous casters can get more spell slots using Wellspring Magic. And those are the 12 new systems we're going to be getting. Unfortunately, it seems I did lie in the last video. They misspoke in the keynote address, and we are not getting blood magic, at least not in this book. They said it's still coming in the future, but it is not going to be released in Secrets of Magic. Unfortunate. Alright, let's talk about new spells and new magic items. They dropped a lot of cool stuff, and the first thing they mentioned, I completely called in one of my last videos. Summon Kaiju is a 10th level spell. Specifically, it is apparently an incarnate spell. This is a new type of conjuration magic. Unlike a normal summon spell where you summon it, sustain it, and it fights with you, an incarnate summon is more like an evocation spell. You summon it, it does one big thing as it enters, and then it immediately leaves doing another big thing. The example they give is summoning a kaiju that can shoot out a 1,000-foot bolt of lightning and then despawn. So these will be incredibly impactful, albeit one-time events. I'm guessing there's still going to be 3 action to summon, because kaijus are just that powerful. They leaked the name of a few more spells, but no real information. They leaked Aberrant Form, which is just going to be another shapeshift that lets you turn into goopy monsters, which I'm all about. Zero Gravity, I don't know how that's going to work, if that's just going to completely remove the ability to move, or if it's going to give everything in a radius a fly speed. I don't know how that's going to work, but that'll be cool. They also announced a new variable action spell. Finally, we're getting more spells like Magic Missile and Heal that can be used with 1, 2, or 3 actions. And good lord, is this spell overtuned! Paizo, what were you thinking? We have Scorching Rey. This is a 2nd level evocation spell that can be used for 1, 2, or 3 actions. For 1 action, you can shoot a 2d6 ray of fire. That's really good already. For 2 actions, you can shoot 2 4d6 rays of fire at different targets. For 3 actions, you can shoot 3 4d6 rays of fire, again, at different targets. So it's important to note you can't use all of these on the same targets, which does balance it a little bit. But if there's 3 goblins for 3 actions, you can just hit all 3 of them for 4d6 or double that or miss. But here's what makes it so ridiculous. The multiple attack penalty does not increase until after all 3 attacks have been made. So that is 3 4d6 fire damage ranged attacks at full multiple attack penalty at level 3. And this can be heightened. And I'm guessing the damage goes up by 2d6 or 4d6 every time it's heightened. No, it can't. It must go up by 1d6 and 2d6. It has to. Paizo, it has to. This is easily going to be one of the strongest evocation spells in the entire game. This is blowing everything else out of the water. What's another 2nd level evocation spell? I want to compare this. Let's compare this to Acid Arrow. Acid Arrow is 2 actions, 3d8 damage, plus 1d6 persistent. Let's be generous and say that persistent lasts for 2 rounds. That's 3d8 plus 2d6. Not bad. Scorching Rey for 2 actions is 8d6. For 3 actions, it's 12d6. 3 chances to crit. Also 3 chances to miss, which is fair. And I don't know about the range. If this is a 30-foot range, maybe it'll be balanced. But that's still absolutely nuts. We're getting a spell called Forceful Hand, which they didn't drop any details, but it can be heightened to have more effects of controlling the battlefield. This seems like a magical spell version of Shove and Trip and Disarm, which I think we were sorely needing. These pigeons gotta leave my birds alone. We're also getting 3 new offensive cantrips. I'm sure we're getting more normal utility cantrips as well, but we have confirmed that we are getting Haunting Hymn, which is a divine offensive cantrips. All you clerics and oracles out there can yell in happy because you don't have to cast Daze anymore. And this is a sonic damage cantrip, that I think is so cool. We are getting Gouging Claw as a cantrip, which is just going to make your hand grow into a massive claw and slash, which is super cool. And Puff of Poison, which is poison. And now to break some people's hearts, there will be no custom spell crafting, at least in this book. And it sounds like Paizo doesn't have any plans to release a custom spell crafting system. And I can't fault them for that. Between all of the new conditions and the 3-action system and the balancing of damage versus DC versus saving throw versus attack rolls, there is a lot going on in this system, and making a perfectly balanced custom system is probably impossible. I'm sure someone will homebrew it eventually, but it's going to take a long, long time, and in a game like Pathfinder 2e, which is still constantly evolving, I don't think they want to design themselves into a corner with that system. Plus, this way they can release more cool, unique spells without people being like, ugh, I already made that already in the custom spell system, Paizo. They're also adding a whole plethora of new magic items, some new consumables like ghostly portal paint, golden chrysalis, Venus flask. They didn't give us any description on how these items work, but I'm guessing the ghostly portal paint will allow you to paint something and like transport to that world. Like if you paint a picture of something you know. No idea what the golden chrysalis is going to do. Venus flask is probably going to give you a bonus to charisma-based stuff, because Venus is the Greek name for Aphrodite, so that's what I would assume. We know there's a utility spell for quick counting, so there's going to be some really fun, like, quote-unquote, not that good cantrips that are just more for quality of life, you know? You don't want to count up a sack of coins, so you just cast quick count. I love it. They're also adding a bunch of new spells that are good for scrolls. Maybe not something you would ever add to your repertoire or prepare in a spell slot, but just have one scroll of it just for the time that it'll come in handy. You never know when it'll happen, but when it does, you'll be thankful you have that scroll. We're getting a new item type called a Spell Heart. These are effectively talismans, but are a permanent upgrade. These, think of it as a rune that doesn't take up a rune slot, and they change their effect depending on if they're applied to an armor or a weapon. The example they gave is the Flaming Star. If you apply this Spell Heart to your armor, you gain permanent fire resistance on that armor. Or if you apply it to your weapon, you gain permanent fire damage on that weapon without taking up a rune slot. Very nice. They're expanding the magical tattoo system, as well as filling in some what they're calling concept gaps, like time spells, magnetic spells, shadow spells, things that absolutely could have existed by now, but they want to fill in those gaps and finally make them a reality. This is the kind of thing I'm excited for. This is what I mean by expanding tall rather than wide. They're not necessarily adding new systems, they're just expanding existing systems like the normal spells. That's what I'm all about. I'm not against adding new systems, but I do feel like it can get a little bit complicated. The last few magic items are really, really cool and kind of augment your playstyle. Grimoires are a specific type of spell book that if a prepared caster prepares their spells in a grimoire, they get a special ability based on that grimoire. I think that's really, really neat. An actual upgrade to your spell book as a wizard is sorely needed, and I love it. Could this be where we finally get our +1 to attack rolls as a wizard? I think that'd be really cool if a wizard with a magical grimoire is, you know, all spells prepared in this grimoire have +1 to their attack rolls and DCs. That'd be kind of insane. I would love that. Level 10 magic item. Paizo, please! We're also getting something called a spell catalyst. Think of these as reagents for a spell that you actually have to keep track of because they augment your spell. The example they gave is the fire starter pellets. You use one of these when you cast Fireball, and boom, your Fireball also adds persistent fire damage to any target that fails the save. This is going to be used with specific spells to give them specific new abilities. I love this. It gives you a reason to track these reagents which actually do something beyond letting you cast the spell, and I am totally here for it. It's something for your spellcasters to invest their gold in between adventures or in town. You know, maybe they don't have a lot of money, they pick up 2 fire starter pellets just for when they really need that extra fire damage. I love this. I cannot wait to see all of the spell catalysts. The final thing they mentioned are 4 new rituals we're getting. We're obviously getting more than 4. These are just the 4 they dropped in the stream. There is Mystic Carriage, which allows you to perform a ritual and then pick a destination, and a magical carriage is summoned and carries you to that destination along the route you decide, which is amazing. There is the Mind Swap ritual, which is pretty self-explanatory and is going to be great for a campaign hook. Whether it's your characters get mind swapped into something, or they need to help that classic wizard who got mind swapped with a goat, and now the evil goat is in his body and trying to take over the world. Take that idea, run with it. It's my gift to you. There's the Asmodean Wager, which lets you make a bet with the god Asmodeus. This is probably a bad idea, and I want to do it. And finally, let's round off this insanely massive video with the ritual Bathe in Blood. It's exactly what it sounds like. You bathe in the blood of the young, and you grow younger. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe, or I will bathe in your blood. Seriously though, Paizo, I'm super excited for Secrets of Magic. This is going to be a crazy book, and it is going to flip Pathfinder 2e on its head. Role players, you have so much flavor to play with. Min-max, you have so many options to play with. This book is sure to please everybody. So thank you all so very much for watching. I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons on the screen right now. Thank you for supporting me and helping me do what I do. If you would also like to financially support the channel and get access to some really cool homebrew, hit the link in the description and the pinned comment below to take you to the No Not One's Patreon page where any pledge of $10 or more gets access to all my homebrew! I'm going to go edit this video, upload it, and then watch the Mwangi Expanse panel. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Until next time, No Nat Ones.